Hey, may peace and power elevation be to all you beautiful people out there on this beautiful day. This your girl Tiffany coming through live from the Fed. So, if you are watching on my YouTube channel, please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you are watching from Facebook, make sure you go ahead and share the video on Facebook. So today, I'm gonna be talking about Marcus Garvey, right? So I won't be on here for very long. However, I wanted to get on the subject because today is Garvey's birthday, right? And this is the day that we commemorate Marcus Garvey. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and share some information about his background and history. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and show you the image of Garvey. All right, this is Marcus Garvey right here. That's him. Okay. As you can see, Marcus Garvey is well respected in the Black community, especially in the revolutionary, those who are in the Black Revolutionary Organization or Black Nationalist Organization. He's well respected and well loved. And peace to everybody out there. And, a lot of people want to always, refer back to Garvey and his work and his information. So what I want to do is I want to take a trip around and show some information, some sources regarding to Marcus Garvey and his history. Okay. So here, I always like to put up articles. All right. So here's an article called "The Marcus Garvey: The Remapping of Africa and Its Diaspora," written by Rupert Lewis. Okay. And so let's read part of the introduction. The imperial remapping of the world over the past millennium was structured on a very profitable economic system undergirded by political, cultural, and racial systems that shored up hegemonic power and gave legitimacy to the 20th century global order of empire and racial oppression. Racial oppression created apartheid in South Africa, Rhodesia, Namibia, and many countries in Africa, while segregation was the name given to racially discriminatory system in the United States. In all of these conditions, racial solidarity arose among the oppressed. All right, so that's the brief introduction that I want to show you. So now let's go down to here where it says catalyst for the Garvey movement. It says Marcus Garvey was born in St. Anne Bay, a northern seaport town of Jamaica, on August 17 of 1887. From his early years in St. Anne's Bay until his death in London on June 10th of 1940, just 2 months short of his 53rd birthday, Garvey used his knowledge of the world, the experience of extensive travel through Central America, Europe, and the West Indies and the United States to develop a global perspective on the future of Africa and people of the African descent, and to build an organization that embodied the aspiration of millions of Africans for self-determination, justice, and freedom. So his main goal was to bring about an organization that will be geared towards bringing self-determination for the people of African descent and justice and freedom, learn how to self-govern. All right. So it goes on to say the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League was launched in Kingston, Jamaica in 1914. Prior to the launch, Garvey said in a pamphlet entitled "A Talk with Afro-West Indians," "For the last 10 years, I have given my time to study of the condition of the Negro here and there and everywhere. And I have come to realize that he is still the object of degradation and pity the world over, in the sense that he has no status socially, nationally, or commercially." And then it goes on to say this degradation was due to the transatlantic slave trade, plantation slavery and colonialism, systems that have been organized by Portugal, Spain, Britain, and France, Holland, the U.S., Belgium, Germany, and Denmark. The scramble for Africa followed on the end of the transatlantic slave trade, and Africa thereby continued to be central to the European economics and politics. In 1876, only 10.8% of Africa had been colonized, but by 1900, 90% of the continent had been carved up. These systems laid the basis for modern racism throughout the world, and Africans and their descendants bore the brunt of its impact for centuries. All right, so let's see. So that information basically is what got Marcus Garvey wanted to start his own movement, because he saw that the oppression was very he saw how serious the oppression was amongst people of African descent. So before I go any further, I want to look into more information about Garvey's life as a young man coming up. Okay. So if you want to find out more information about Marcus Garvey and the remapping of Africa and its diaspora, you can look up this source right here. It's called The Marcus Garvey Remapping of Africa and its Diaspora, Rupert Lewis. Okay. So let's go ahead and find out some more information about Garvey. All right, so here I am right here. All right, so what else can we find out about Mr. Garvey? Okay, it says he was a Jamaican, a political activist, publisher, journalist, entrepreneur, and orator. He was a founder and first president general of Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Community Leagues, through which he declared himself provisional president of Africa, ideologically a Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist. His ideas came to be known as Garveyism. All right, and Garveyism is still prevalent to this day. Okay, so let's go into his early life. That's a statue of him right here in front of a building called St. Anne Parish. Okay, that's a statue. And it says that, again, it said that he was born in Jamaica, right? The colony of St. Anne Bay on August 17, 1887. Now it says, in the context of colonial Jamaican society, which had colorist social hierarchy, Garvey was considered at the lowest end. Now, he was considered at the lowest end because of the hierarchy, right? The social hierarchy that took place during that time. So Garvey was considered at the lowest end, being a Black child who believed he was full of African ancestry. Later, genetic research nevertheless revealed that he had some Iberian ancestors, which is the Iberian Peninsula that's over in Europe. Garvey's paternal great-grandfather had been born into slavery prior to its abolition in the British Empire. His surname, which was of Irish origin, had been inherited from his family's former owners. I didn't know that Garvey was a Irish name. But anyways, his father, what's his name? Michaelis Garvey, was a stonemason. His mother, Sarah Richards, was a domestic servant and the daughter of peasant farmers. Michaelis had two previous partners before Sarah, having 6 children between them. Sarah bore him 4 additional children, of whom Marcus was the youngest, although 2 died in infancy. Because of his profession, Michaelis' family were wealthier than many of their peasant neighbors. They were petty bourgeoisie. mean that they hold on. Okay, so let's look up what the petty bourgeoisie is real quick. So petty bourgeoisie means a small bourgeoisie, or is a French term, sometimes that's derogatory, referring to social class compromising semi-autonomous peasantry and small-scale merchants whose political, economic, ideological stance in times of social economic stability is determined by reflecting that of a hot bourgeoisie with which the petty bourgeoisie seek to identify itself and whose bourgeoisie morality it strives to imitate. Okay, so according to that information, Marcus Garvey's father happened to be a wealthy man. Okay, because he was a stone man and he was considered to be in the petty bourgeoisie class. So that was like a upper rank. But nevertheless, even though his father was wealthy, he still was considered to be a low standard or lower class because of his race. That goes back to the concept that I had mentioned the other day about the master and slave mentality. So yeah, you could be wealthy, right? But you could still be a lower rank. And that's just what happened with Garvey's father in this case. All right, so let's see, what else can we find out? Okay, it says Macaulay was, however, reckless with his money and over the course of his life lost most of the land he owned to meet payments. Macaulay had a book collection and was self-educated. He also served as an occasional layman at a local Wesleyan church. Macaulay was an intolerant and punitive father and husband. He never had a close relationship with his son. So obviously, Marcus Garvey's father was very strict on him, very hard on him, to the point that they could never have a relationship as a father and son type of thing. So it sounds like, it appears that his father was abusive, or he turned out to be abusive to Marcus, but maybe in his mind that he wasn't trying to be abusive, but he just tried to be more strict and polished and let him know where he stands. So, but it says here Marcus Garvey never got a relationship. Yeah, and I have a picture of Garvey right here in the background if you can see it. Yeah, that's a picture of him. But anyways, let's continue. Then it says up to the age of 14, Garvey attended a local church school. Further education was unaffordable for the family. When not in school, Garvey worked on his maternal uncle's tenant farm. He had friends with whom he once broke the windows of a church, resulting in his arrest. Some of his friends were white, although he found that as they grew older, they distanced themselves from him. Now, let's read that part again. Some of his friends were white, although he found that as they grew old, they distanced themselves from him. Why is that? Why did they distance themselves from him? Because of their status, because of the race. That's why. So anybody that want to holler, oh, I got white friends, this, that, and the other. Yeah, okay, you got white friends, but how often would they stick around? Because not all of them gonna stick around. And then this is how you test their friendship. Talk about race and see where they stand on their position about race. Talk about the history and see where they stand on their history. See how supportive are they. But let's continue. And it said he later recalled that close childhood friend was a white girl. We were two innocent fools who never dreamed of a race feeling and problem. In 1901, Marcus was apprenticed to his godfather, a local printer. In 1904, the printer opened another branch at Port Maria, where Garvey began to work, traveled from St. Anne's Bay each morning. All right. So right then that Marcus Garvey encountered racism at a very young age. And it started off with the people that he was friends with, that he was close with. But they end up turning the opposite direction. All right, so then it goes on over here to talk about the early career in Kingston, 1905 to 1904. Right, in 1905, he moved to Kingston, where he boarded in Smith Village, a working class neighborhood in the city. He secured work with the printing division of the PA Benjamin Manufacturing Company. He rose quickly through the company ranks, becoming their first Afro-Jamaican foreman. His sister and mother by this point estranged from his father and moved to join him in the city. In January 1907, Kingston was hit by an earthquake that reduced much of the city. Reduced much of the city to rumble. His mother, and his sister were left to sleep in the open for several months. In 1908, his mother died. While in Kingston, Garvey converted to Roman Catholicism. Marcus Garvey became a Roman Catholic. So for all my Garveyites out there, right? For all my black nationalists that talk about, oh, you need to get rid of religion and this, that, and other, that's the white man stuff. Well, guess what? Marcus Garvey was a Christian. And he stayed a Christian to the day he died. So what you got to say about that for those of you who think that you cannot be in a religious organization and have and study black nationalism? There was no either or with Garvey. Garvey was a Christian and he still was a black nationalist. All right. Anyways, let's continue. It says Garvey became a trade unionist and took a leading role in the November 1908 print workers' strike. The strike was broken several weeks later, and Garvey was sacked. Henceforth, branded a troublemaker, Garvey was unable to find work in the private sector. He then found temporary employment with a government printer. As a result of these experiences, Garvey became increasingly angry at the inequalities present in Jamaican society. All right. So then we're going to read down a little further right here. It says, Garvey involved himself with the National Club, Jamaica's first nationalist organization, becoming its first assistant secretary in April of 1910. The group campaigned to remove the British governor of Jamaica, Sidney Oliver, from office and to end the migration of Indian coolies or indentured workers to Jamaica, as they were seen as a source of economic competition by the established population. With fellow club members, Wilford Domingo, he published a pamphlet expressing the group's ideals, The Struggling Mass. In early 1910, Garvey began publishing a magazine, Garvey's Watchman. It's named a reference to George William Gordon's The Watchman. Although it only lasted 3 issues, he claimed it had a circulation of 3,000. Although this was likely an exaggeration, Garvey also enrolled the elocution lesson with the radical journalist Joseph Robert Love, who Garvey came to regard as a mentor. With his enhanced skills at speaking in a standard English manner, he entered several public speaking competition. So Garvey worked for a printing company, right? And that didn't go too well with him because they had to go on strike. And then on top of that, he started to join a nationalist organization. His first nationalist organization was in Jamaica. It was a national club in 1910. And it was to overthrow the British governor of Jamaica at that time. And so, Marcus, things didn't go very well because Marcus had to learn how to if he wanted to draw a crowd, he had to learn how to enhance his speech. So that's when he was able to come across somebody named Joseph Robert Love, who taught him how to be very more eloquent and more powerful in his speech. Now imagine, by him being from Jamaica, maybe he was speaking patois, and it was hard for him. It was hard for people to really understand him, on the international level. So that's when he had to learn how to use standard English and be more articulating. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's read this little part right here. It says, travels aboard 1910 to 1914. Economic hardship in Jamaica led to growing immigration from the island. In mid-1910, Garvey traveled to Costa Rica, where an uncle had secured him employment as a timekeeper on a large banana plantation in the Limon province owned by the United Fruit Company. Shortly after his arrival, the area experienced strikes and unrest in opposition to the UFC's attempt to cut its workers' wages. Although as a timekeeper, he was responsible for overseeing the manual workers, he became increasingly angered at how they were treated. In the spring of 1911, he launched a bilingual newspaper, National/Nation, which criticized the action of the UFC and upset many of the dominant strata of Costa Rican society in Limon. His coverage of a local fire, in which he questioned the motives of the fire barricade, resulting in him being brought in for police questioning. After his printing press broke, he was unable to replace the faulty part and terminated the newspaper. So in the beginning, Marcus Garvey was a writer. He wrote about a lot of things. He did a lot of newspaper articles. So Garvey was more of a writer than he was of a speaker. So now let's look into a little bit about his organization of the UNIA. Okay. So why he created that? It says forming UNIA 1914 to 1916, right? Garvey arrived back in Jamaica in July of 1914. There he saw his article for the tourist republished, the Gleaner. He began earning money selling greeting and condolences cards, which he had imported from Britain, before later switching to selling on tombstones. And it says, to cultured mind, the bulk of our Black people are contemptible. Go into the country parts of Jamaica and you will see the villainy and vice of the worst kind, immorality, obeah, and all kinds of dirty things. Now, it's funny that he mentioned obeah, right? Because by him being a Christian, a lot of people who was in the Abrahamic religion, right, that was heavily religious, they thought obeah was the work of the devil, because obeah consists of voodoo practice and things of that nature. They thought that was the work of the devil. And that's how Marcus Garvey thought about obeah. And you got to remember, he was thinking from a religious perspective. Yeah, he said immorality, obeah, and all kinds of dirty things. Kingston and its environs are so infested with the unclout and vulgar of our people that we of the culture class feel positively ashamed to move about. Well, this society, the UNIA, has set itself the task to go among the people and raise them to the standard of civilized approval. And that came from Garvey from a 1915 Collegiate Hall speech published in the Daily Chronicle. Okay. Now, also, it goes down to say, on July the 1914, Garvey launched the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, commonly abbreviated as UNIA, adopting the motto, one aim, one God, one destiny. It declared its commitment to establish a brotherhood among the black race, to promote a spirit of race pride, to reclaim the fallen, and to assist in civilizing the backwards tribes of Africa. Initially, it had only few members. Many Jamaicans were critical of the group's prominent use of the term Negro, a term which was often employed as an insult. Garvey, however, embraced the term in reference to black people of African descent. Okay. You gotta remember at that time, the term Negro was a prevalent term. You know, they didn't really use the term black. They said Negro. So Negro was the common terminology back then, which was used as a social construct. So we all know that black in itself don't really exist, technically speaking, but it's that social construct that we're used to. So when we're identifying ourselves as a group, as a social group and a race group, we use the term black, right? But you have to also make a distinction with that too, because you got other groups that also identify as black. Okay. Now, it goes on to say Garvey became UNIA's president and traveling commissioner. It was initially based out of his hotel room in Orange Street, Kingston. It portrayed itself not as a political organization, but as a charitable club. So it wasn't a political organization in the beginning. It was a charitable club. Focused on work to help the poor and to ultimately establish a vocational training college model on Washington's Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Garvey wrote to Washington and received a brief, if encouraging reply. Washington died shortly after. UNIA officially expressed its loyalty to the British Empire, King George the Fourth, I believe, or the Fifth, and the British effort in the ongoing First World War. In April of 1915, Brigadier General L.S. Blackden lectured on the group on the war effort. Garvey endorsed Blackden's call for more Jamaicans to sign up to fight for the empire on the Western Front. The group also sponsored musical and literary events, as well as a February 1915 elocution contest at which Garvey took first prize. Okay. So now it gets into his personal life a little bit. It says in August of 1914, Garvey attended a meeting of the Queen Street Baptist Literary and Debating Society, where he met Amy Ashwood, recently graduated from the Westwood Training College for Women. She joined UNIA and rented a better premises for them to use as their headquarters, secure using her father's credit. She and Garvey embarked on a relationship which was opposed by her parents. And in 1915, they secretly became engaged. When she suspended the engagement, he threatened to commit suicide, at which she resumed it. And then it goes on to say, I was openly hated and persecuted by some of these colored men on the islands who did not want to be classified as Negroes, but as white. Now that's deep. That's really deep. And it says, Garvey attracted financial contribution from prominent patrons, including the mayor of Kingston and the governor of Jamaica, William Manning. By appealing directly to Jamaica's white elite, Garvey had skipped the brown middle classes, compromising those who were classified as mulatto, quadroons, and octoroons. They were generally hostile to Garvey, regard him as a pretentious social climber, and being annoyed at his claim to be part of the cultural class of Jamaican society. And many also felt that he was unnecessarily derogatory when describing Black Jamaicans, with letters of complaint being sent into the Daily Chronicle after it published one of Garvey's speeches in which he referred to many of his people as unclout and vulgar. One complainant, Dr. Leo Pink, related that the Jamaican Negro cannot be reformed by abuse. After unsubstantiated allegation began circling, that Garvey was diverting UNIA funds to pay for his own personal expenses, the group's support began to decline. He became increasingly aware of how UNIA had failed to thrive in Jamaica and decided to immigrate to the United States, selling there abroad the SS Talactic in March 1916. So the UNIA population began to decline in Jamaica, where because they was growing suspicion that Garvey was using the funds outside of the organization for his personal expenses. And then also he was getting ridiculed by the people in the citizen in Jamaica, especially those who were considered to be mulatto and other multiracial backgrounds. They looked at him like he was just a problem. They was like, well, he can't be a part of this class right here, because Marcus was trying to get into the elite class, right? He was trying to appeal so he can be able to get as much resource as he can, but they was like, nah, we don't want him. And then what he said about the Jamaican people, nah, we definitely don't want him. He called them vulgar and called, pretty much saying they were, being trashy and all that. They didn't like that. They said, nah, we don't accept him. We don't want him here. So pretty much he was on his own. So all that drama and allegation that he had to deal with, he decided that, okay, it's time for me to go to the United States because it ain't popping here in Jamaica as of right now. So let's see. What else can I find? All right, so we're going to look at this article real quick. Well, let's go down to the United States in 1916 and 1918 real fast. All right. So that's the flag right there, the Pan-African flag. All right. And then it goes on to talk about arriving in the United States. Garvey initially lodged with a Jamaican, expatriate family living in Harlem, a largely Black area of New York City. He began lecturing in the city, hoping to make a career as a public speaker, although his first public speech was heckled and fell off the stage. Wow. From New York City, he embarked on a U.S. speaker tour, crossing 38 states. At stopovers on his journey, he listened to preachers from the African Methodist Episcopal Church and the Black Baptist churches. While in Alabama, he visited the Tuskegee Institute and met with its new leader, Robert Russell Moulton. After 6 months traveling across the U.S. lecturing, he returned to New York City. Okay. Then it goes on to say in May of 1917, Garvey launched a New York branch of the UNIA. He declared membership open to anyone of Negro blood and African ancestry who could pay the 25 cents a month membership fee. He joined many other speakers who spoke on the street, standing on the step ladders. He often did so at Speaker's Corner on 135th Street. In his speeches, he sought to reach across to both Afro-Caribbeans, migrants like himself, and Native African Americans. Through this, he began to associate with Herbert Harrison, who was promoting ideas of Black self-reliance and racial separatism. In June, Garvey shared a stage with Harrison at the inaugural meeting of the latter's Liberty League of Negro Americans. Through his appearance here and at other events organized by Harrison, Garvey attracted growing public attention. All right. So then it goes on to say, after the U.S. entered the First World War in April 1917, Garvey initially signed up to fight, but was ruled physically unfit to do so. He later became an opponent of African American involvement in the conflict, following Harrison in accusing it of being a white man's war. In the wake of the East St. Louis race riot in May to July 1917, in which white mobs target Black people, Garvey began calling for armed self-defense. He produced a pamphlet, The Conspiracy of the East St. Louis Riots, which was widely distributed, proceeded proceeds from its sale went to victims of the riot. The Bureau of Investigation began monitoring him, noting that in speeches he employed more militant language than they used in print. It, for instance, reported him expressing the view that for every Negro lynched by whites in the South, Negroes should lynch a white in the North. So again, Marcus Garvey was very controversial because he went from self-reliance to saying now you gotta be for self-defense. You gotta fight for self. You can't turn the other cheek. So this was before Malcolm. Because see, Malcolm wasn't the first to talk about bear arms and self-defense. Garvey spoke on that as well. He did. So real fast, if you want to look up more information, this is what you do. Or you just go down here where it says references, and you find a lot of references, a lot of footnote right here, a lot of sources. Then you got further reading over here. And you got the external links. So we're going to come back to this, but I want to look at something else real fast. All right, so here is an article right here. It's called Marcus Garvey, a Controversial Figure in the History of Pan-Africanism. Okay. All right. So it's written by Jerome Kobon Denagni, Department of Anglophone Studies, Université Miguel de Montebourg, France. So it's a university in France, right? And they go on to talk about the controversy that Marcus Garvey had during the time of the Pan-Africanist movement. And so, let's see. Oh, it can be found in the Journal of Pan-African Studies, Volume 2, Number 3, March of 2008. Okay. Now it goes on and says, first off, Marcus Garvey founded the UNIA in 1914 in his country, Jamaica. The main goal of this organization was to institute a separate but equal collegiate educational system for Black Jamaicans. He was influenced by the ideas of Booker T. Washington and planned to develop a school similar to his Tuskegee Institute founded in 1881 in Alabama. Indeed, Garvey was convinced that education was the means to liberate his people and to develop a Black consciousness so that Black people could reach political, economic, and cultural independence. So it says in 1916, he went to the United States of America in hope of sharing his views with Booker T. Washington, but later, unfortunately, died just before he arrived. However, he embarked upon a long period of travel around the U.S., giving speeches and lectures before settling down in New York, where he set up a branch of UNIA in 1917. Okay, so and it says, according to Edmund D. Cronum, it contained 2,000 members within 3 weeks. And with a few years, Garvey became one of the best known Black leaders in the United States and perhaps in the entire world. In 1919, there were about 30 UNIA branches throughout the U.S. and 2 million members worldwide. Through the UNIA, Garvey created, among other things, a printing house, factories, trading companies, and schools with the single aim of improving the life of Black people. Among his numerous accomplishments was his weekly newspaper, The Negro World, which enabled him to inform readers about UNIA activities and thus convey a Pan-African message. All right, so he really wanted to do what Booker T. Washington did by starting up a school for the Blacks in Jamaica, but he didn't get that opportunity to meet Booker T. Washington to go over his ideas and his views because Booker T. had passed. So Garvey just took it upon himself, just keep on traveling, giving speeches, and be able to grow membership that way. All right. So let's see. And it says actually Garvey wanted to restore black people's dignity, which slavery and colonization had tried to degrade. He wanted black people to stop thinking they were inferior beings and that they could acquire knowledge, technical, and financial means to free themselves from the yoke of white people. What is more, Garvey became more and more involved in the Back to Africa movement and created an international shipping company called the Black Star Line. It was, in fact, a shipping line belonging to black people and operating by and for them. Stocks were sold at UNIA convention, whose long-term main goal was the repatriation of African Americans, African Jamaicans, and other black people of the diaspora to their African homeland. Today, everyone agrees that Marcus Garvey's Black Star Line stands as a strong symbol of Pan-Africanism. All right. So now let's go down here where it says, at first sight, Marcus Garvey's program falls into the notion of black pride and Pan-Africanism. Indeed, he was clearly against enslavement, colonization, and any doctrine aiming at enslaving black people. He advocated the freedom of black people, those in Africa and those abroad, at political, economical, and cultural levels, and was convinced that the liberation and empowerment of his people would happen through education. Following the example of the United States, the United Kingdom, and other European countries, Garvey promoted the establishment of a strong and powerful African empire and governed by Africans, and put forward his person for the position of the eventual head of Africa. Furthermore, Garvey was not only a theologian with great ideas, but also an action man too, for he made every endeavor to turn his ideas into reality through concrete actions such as the UNIA and the Black Star Line. All right. So Garvey was very committed, right? He was very committed to doing what he can for his people. Now, let's see right here. It says, however, his amazing undertakings coupled with his segregationist ideologies led other contemporary Pan-Africanists like W.E.B. Du Bois to come into conflict with him. Nevertheless, his contribution to Pan-Africanism was real, as his struggle and accomplishment and projects mentioned earlier showed. Garvey has been all the more associated with Pan-Africanism since a wide variety of famous Pan-Africanists and black nationalists claim to take their inspiration from him, such as Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana in 1957, Leopold Sedar Senghor, the first president of independent Senegal in 1960, and the father of negritude, Patrice Lumumba, the first prime minister of independent Congo in 1960, Julius Nyerere, the first president of independent Tanzania in 1962, Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of independent Kenya in 1964, Steve Biko and Nelson Mandela, Malcolm X, the Nigerian singer Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and the Jamaican reggae stars Burning Spear and Bob Marley, to just name a few. It also must be stressed that the Rasta movement, which is nothing more than a mixture of Judeo-Christian beliefs, African centeredness, and African religion, has been clearly influenced by Marcus Garvey's ideologies. Moreover, according to Robert Hill, an authority on Marcus Garvey, the Rastafarians have more than anyone kept alive his memory after his death in 1940. So Marcus Garvey has influenced many groups of people, especially those in the African countries. He has influenced people like Patrice Lumumba, also Kwame Nkrumah, Fela, Malcolm X, Steve Biko, And he has played a prominent role within the Rastafarian movement. The Rastafarians people are really heavily on Garvey's ideology about Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism and all that. They really take heed to that. So Marcus Garvey has a lot of influence even after his death. To this day, he still has influence. So then they go on to talk about the contradiction in Marcus Garvey ideology and lifestyle. Let's look at that. Let's see what they're talking about here. Okay, so it says the second part of this paper is aimed at stressing a certain number of contradictions in Marcus Garvey's ideology and lifestyle. The first inconsistency concerned his point of view on races. In September of 1923, Marcus Garvey said in a speech delivered in New York, "We who believe in race purity, we believe that white race should protect itself against racial contamination, and the Negro race should do the same." In 1924, he added that the United Negro Improvement Association believed in the purity of the Negro race and the purity of the white race, and advocated for the Africans based upon the same nationalistic concept of Europe for the Europeans. It says, actually, Marcus Garvey responded to violence, racism, and nationalism of the white society of the time with the same weapons, namely racism and xenophobia, but such an attitude did not uplift the Pan-African movement. It completely undermined the credibility of it instead. Okay, it says, indeed, this could have had serious consequences, such as the confusion between Pan-Africanism and doctrine like those of apartheid or Nazism. Moreover, this is worth noting, in March of 1934, in his magazine, The Black Man, Garvey recommended that his readers peruse a Mein Kampf, expressing his hope that one day the black race would produce its own Hitler. He wrote the following disturbing words: "Hitler has a lesson to teach, and he is teaching it well." In fact, Hitler was not the only European leader whom Marcus Garvey admired. He also paid tribute to Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, Napoleon, the highest priest of slavery and colonization. Last but not least, he even began a close association with the white racist group named the Ku Klux Klan, praising the Klan's intention of making America a white man's country. In July 1922, he publicly said, "From impression, my observation from understanding, the Ku Klux Klan is a mighty white organization in the United States of America, organized for the purpose of upholding white supremacy in this country. Organized for the purpose of making America a white man's country, pure and simple. The organization has absolutely no apology to make as far as its program is concerned. A program of making America a white man's country. The Ku Klux Klan desired to make America absolutely a white man's country. The United Negro Improvement Association wants to make Africa absolutely a black man's country." So Marcus Garvey saw the influences in people like Mussolini and Hitler, right? Because he saw that they brought leadership to their countries and create their own philosophy. He said, hey, and he also saw inspiration in the Ku Klux Klan. Now, I'm not saying that he likes them in the sense of he want to be in their organization, but he liked their ideology. He's like, okay, I see what they doing. They want America to be a white man's country in totality. To be in control by the white people. He said, well, why can't Africa not be the same? Why can't Africa not be in control by the blacks, right, without colonial rules? Well, Garvey had got his wish because, again, these black leaders were influenced by him. Kwame Nkrumah, right, Patrice Lumumba, and many other hosts of African leaders, Steve Biko, they were all influenced by that. And because of his influence, it allowed them to gain their independence. These African countries were able to gain independence to where they had African leaders that was running the country. Now in the United States, as of today, we don't really have so many leaders. We have those who are mayors, right? But we don't have black governors. Now, we almost did in Georgia. We almost did. And it was a black woman. And that's Stacey Abrams, right? She almost became the governor, but Kemp pretty much had a lot more votes than she did. So that's why she didn't step in. But yeah, you got black leaders so far that will be in the politician role, such as mayors and city council, and that's about it. But Obama, but we don't really consider Obama as a black president. Okay, Obama didn't really do a whole lot as a black president, or because he didn't really cater to everyone. You know what I'm saying? He catered to other groups, but he didn't cater to everyone in general. So we don't really consider that as our first black president, because he wasn't strong enough, in our opinion. Just saying. But yeah, all right. So let's go down to here, and it says the second inconsistency in his life lies in his attitude towards Christianity. It is common knowledge that Marcus Garvey was a Christian, Roman Catholic first, and then a member of the African Orthodox Church, to be precise. He showed great respect for the Bible, the King James Version, and often referred to the Holy Book in his speeches. Moreover, one of his favorite quotation was, "Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God." The distinctive characteristic of his faith was that he believed in a black God, the God of Ethiopia, as he used to call him, and promoted an Afrocentric version of Christianity. So he stayed with Christianity, but check this out. He promoted the concept of Afrocentrism in Christianity, black nationalism in Christianity. So again, he didn't separate the two. He brought them together. He said, all right, I'm a Christian, but guess what? I'm a black nationalist. And these two going to be combined together because we need a black God that we can look up to represent us. We need a black God. Now, at that time, he figured that the God would be the God of Ethiopia. Now, I don't know if I don't know what his relationship was like with Haile Selassie. Now, and that's in the Rastafarian culture. They believe that Haile Selassie is the God, is the, is the second coming of Christ, or Christ incarnated, whatever. So that's what they believe. But Haile Selassie himself was a Christian. And he didn't see himself as a God. He saw himself as a leader of a country in Ethiopia. But they say, nah, he's a God. Even though he don't know that he's a God, but he a God. So getting back to Garvey believed that God should personify a black person, an image of a black person. So Garvey was very radical. He was extremely radical. He was extremely Afrocentric. He was a Pan-Africanist, a straight black nationalist all the way. All right. Ooh. Okay, so let's go ahead and so let's go ahead and let's just look down real quick. Some more information. Now it says the other main contradiction that we can notice in Garvey's life regards some cultural civilization elements such as education, language, music, and clothing. As mentioned above, Garvey was convinced that education was the means to liberate his people. For that reason, he championed studies, instruction, and knowledge. To understand his attitude towards education, it is important to highlight that Marcus Garvey was a self-educated man, contrary to other contemporary Pan-Africanists like W.E.B. Du Bois, who received his PhD from Harvard. He probably had to take a revenge on his own education. Whatever it was, Garvey spoke highly of education. But what is education if not a Western institute par excellence? Is there a contradiction between proclaiming Pan-Africanism and advocating education? Is it possible? Yes, for the mere reason that, roughly speaking, education inevitably result in the building of a bourgeoisie, if not an elite, and hence a two-speed society with a sharp divide between the elite, the rich, and the rest of the population, which remains largely at the bottom of the social ladder. The poor, the former generally exploited the latter. All right. So, although Marcus Garvey was advocating for education, but the problem was that his education would go through the Western system. You know, it wouldn't be so much of Pan-Africanism. So, but I mean, that's important too, because you still gotta learn about, you know, your other counterparts and their culture and their history. You have to study why. You gotta be able to learn how to speak their language. Because if you can't speak their language, then you can't be able to get where you need to be. So Marcus Garvey still stuck with the idea of Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism, but he also understood that you had to study your counterparts as well. All right, so anyways, that's the source of information right here. Marcus Garvey, a controversial figure in the history of Pan-Africanism. All right, that's the information. You can look that up yourself. Let's see what else I want to show real quick. All right, so we got the one by Dr. John Henry Clark right here. Marcus Garvey, the Harlem Years. All right. And I'm going to read this real fast. It says, there is not a renaissance of interest in life of Marcus Garvey. The African independence explosion started in 1957 when the former West African colony called the Gold Coast became independent country, now called Ghana, helped to set this renaissance in motion. Some of Marcus Garvey's dreams about African redemption were being realized in his lifetime. He was a man who had a stubborn belief in the impossible and came close to achieving it during the uncertain years that followed the First World War. He built the largest Black mass movement that this country has ever seen. There was never a leader like him before or since. His popularity was universal. His program for redemption of Africa and the return of African people to their motherland shook the foundation of 3 empires. All right. So it says, in nearly all matters relating to the resurgence of African people in this country and abroad, there is reconsideration of this man in his program that seemed impossible in his lifetime. His prophecy has been fulfilled in the independent explosion that brought more than 30 African nations into being. The concept of Black power that he advocated using other terms is now a reality in large areas of the world where the people of African origins are predominant. It says Marcus Garvey principal area of agitation were Afro-American struggles in the United States, his native Caribbean islands, and the universe of Black humanity everywhere. From the year of his arrival in the United States in 1916 to his deportation in 1927, the ethnic community called Harlem was his window on the world. From this vantage point, he became one of the great figures of the 20th century. All right. So this was written by Dr. John Henry Clark right here. Dr. John Henry Clark wrote this article back in the 70s. Okay. Yes. So you can check it out yourself if you want to look up more information. So it says the Harlem Years, Dr. John Henry Clark, transition 1974, number 46. This is the page number. And Indiana University Press. All right. Okay, so, and then here's another article right here. It's called, What About Marcus Garvey, Race and the Transformation of Sovereignty Debate? All right. So it also goes into the history about Garvey. It was written by Robbie Shillams. Okay. And this information is a review of international studies, July of 2006, volume 32, number 3. So the page number came out of 379 to 400 at Cambridge University Press. So that's the article. You can check that out for yourself. Okay. So now let's get back to it. Okay. Let's talk about his imprisonment. Now, Marcus Garvey was locked up in the prison in Atlanta. Okay. And that federal prison is still around to this day. That federal prison is still around to this day. As a matter of fact, it's right next to an area that is called Four Seasons. Well, it used to be called Four Seasons. Now it's called Forest Clove. Okay. It's right next to that area. And you know what's ironic? I grew up around the corner from that area too. So yeah, I grew up around the corner from that prison. Yeah, so yeah, that prison is still around to this day, and it still look the same, but it has expanded a little bit. So yeah, it's called the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. That's where Marcus Garvey was locked up at. And maybe one day I can show an image, around the city, and I can show the area where Garvey was locked up. But that was the place that Marcus Garvey got locked up for mail fraud. Let's check it out. Now, it says in early 1925, the U.S. Court of Appeal upheld the original court decision. Garvey was in Detroit at the time and was arrested while aboard a train back to New York City. In February, he was taken to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and incarcerated there. In prison, he was made to carry out cleaning tasks. On one occasion, he was reprimanded for insolence towards the white prison officer. There, he became increasingly ill with chronic bronchitis and lung infection. 2 years into his imprisonment, he would be hospitalized with influenza. He received regular letters from UNIA members and his wife. She also visited him every 3 weeks. With his support, she assembled another book of his collected speech, which is called Philosophy and Opinions. These had often been edited to remove inflammatory comments about wielding violence against white people. He also wrote the Meditation of Marcus Garvey, its name in allusion to the Meditation of Marcus Aurelius. From the prison, Garvey continued corresponding with far-right white supremacist activists like Ernest Sevier Cox of the White American Society and John Powell of the Anglo-Saxon Clubs of America. The latter visit Garvey in prison. So yeah, Marcus Garvey was locked up in the Atlanta Federal Prison for mail fraud for a few years, and he became ill. All right, and let's go on down real quick. So in January 1940, Garvey suffered a stroke which left him largely paralyzed. His secretary, Daisy White, took on responsibility for his care. At this point, Patmore spread rumors of Garvey's death that led to many newspapers publishing premature obituaries, many of which he read. Garvey then suffered a second stroke and died at the age of 52 on June 10th of 1940. His body was interred in a vault in the catacombs of St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church in Kensal Green Cemetery in West London. All right. So, yeah, Garvey ended up passing away at the age of 52 from a stroke. So, real quick, I wanted to show you guys some books that you can look up for yourself. So this book right here is called The Black Moses, Story of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. All right. That's him. So let's see. And these are the table of contents. Let's see, who was it written by? Okay, it was written by E. David O'Corian with a foreword by John Hope Franklin. And this book was written in 1955, 1969. All right. So I'm trying to go down to the intro. All right, so here's some of the pictures right here. Let us guide our own destiny. That's the Black Star Line right here. All right, so let's see. All right, so let's look up. Let's read chapter 1. Trying to. All right, let's read chapter 1 real quick. All right, it says a son is given. And it says, God did say to Moses one day, say, Moses, go to Egypt land and tell him to let my people go. Traditional Negro spiritual. I know no national boundary where the Negro is concerned. The whole world is my province until Africa is free. All right, so, and it says, a short, stocky, largely self-educated but supremely confident black man, Garvey came to the United States at the age of 28 and proceeded to build up a mass following in an incredibly brief time. His peculiar gift of auditory and combination of bombast and sterling heroes awakened fires of Negro nationalism that have yet to be extinguished. Garvey attracted attention chiefly because he put into powerful, ringing phrases the secret thoughts of the Negro world. He told his listeners what they most wanted to hear, that a black skin was not a badge of shame, but rather a glorious symbol of national greatness. He promised a Negro nation in the African homeland that would be marvel of the modern world. He pointed to Negro triumphs in the past and described in glowing syllables the glories of the future. When Garvey spoke of the greatness of the race, Negroes everywhere could forget for a moment the shame of discrimination and horrors of lynching. Garvey's program was strongly emotional, fiercely chauvinistic, bitterly Protestant in character. This latter day, Moses achieved little in the way of permanent improvement for his people, but he did help to point out the fires that smolder in the Negro world. Indeed, Garvey's success in catching the ear of his people indicates, as Gunnar Martel has observed, the existence of a dissatisfaction so deep that it mounts to hopelessness of ever gaining a full life in America. All right. So that comes from this book right here called The Black Moses. All right. And then there's another book which is called The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, edited by Amy Jacks Garvey, which is his wife. All right, so now right here it goes on and says, chapter 1, history is the landmark by which we are directed into the true course of life. The history of a movement, the history of a nation, the history of a black of a race is the guidepost of that movement's destiny, that nation destiny, that race destiny. What you do today is worthwhile, inspires others to act at some future time. It says, chance has never yet satisfied the hope of a suffering people. Action, self-reliance, the vision of self, and the future have been the only means by which the oppressed has seen and realized the light of their own freedom. All right. So it says, life is that existing that is given to man to live for a purpose, to live his own satisfaction and pleasure, providing he forgets not the God who created him and who expects a spiritual obedience and observation of the moral laws that he has inspired. There is nothing in the world common to man that man cannot do. The ends you serve that are selfish will take you no further than yourself, but the end you serve that are for all in common will take you even in eternity. It is only the belief and the confidence we have in God why man is able to understand his own social institution and move and live like a rational human being. Take away the highest ideal, faith and confidence in a God, and mankind at large is reduced to savagery and the race destroyed. A race without authority and power is a race without respect. Criticism is an opinion for good or ill, generally indulged in by the fellow who knows more than anyone else. Yet the biggest fool, there is no criticism that calls not forth yet another. The last critic is the biggest fool of all, for the world starts and ends with him. He is the source of all knowledge, yet knows nothing, for there is not a word one finds to use that there is not another that have the same meaning. Then wherefore do we criticize? Okay, so that's chapter 1 of Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. That was edited by his wife, Amy Jacks Garvey. Okay, it was written in 1923. So if you want to check it out, you can go look it up yourself if you have the book. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm gonna have to end this video, you guys. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate that a lot. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to Tiffany French. And also, if you are watching this video on Facebook, you go ahead and share this video. With that being said, I will talk to you guys later. Take it easy. May peace and power elevation be to you. Deuces. All right.